three-day meeting in which 500 foreign delegates, including finance ministers and central bank governors from G20 countries, guest countries, and heads of various international organizations participated. There were only 4 countries whose finance ministers or central bank governors could not attend in person. They are China, Mexico, Russia, and Turkey. With that said, I would like to add that the virtual participation of some of these ministers and central bank governors also happened. So it wasn't as if they were not at all there. They were physically not here, they could participate virtually. India has always tried to make efforts to be a voice of the South, global South. And you know the Honorable Prime Minister much before our presidency commenced, a month after that in January, held a consultation with all the global South countries in a virtual mode, and therefore we have taken it upon ourselves, like always before, to voice the key concerns of developing countries. We did that even in this meeting. We have certainly given priority for India's neighborhood, but not stopping at that, we have also invited to give a voice to the global South. We have invited and brought to the table of the G20 participation of some countries who we've invited in the G20 India presidency's first FMCBG meeting. I'll just name those countries. From our immediate neighborhood, it was Nepal and Bangladesh. From Africa, Senegal, Morocco, Egypt, and Nigeria. From the Middle East, Oman. And from the Indian Ocean countries, Mauritius. So these countries have been invited to be, as a guest country, to be participating. And they did attend the meeting. The 3-day meet began, the first day was the deputies meeting, and 24th and 25th were the ministers and the governors meeting. And that started off with a video message from Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi. The Prime Minister urged, and I'm just giving a one-line summary or a highlight of what the Prime Minister's video message said, calling the finance ministers and the central bank governors as custodians of the leading economies and monetary systems of the world. Honorable Prime Minister urged us to bring back stability, confidence, and growth to the global economy. That was the gist of his video message. And of course, guided by the theme which is given for the G20 India presidency, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, One Earth, One Family, One Future. The discussions were looking at holistic solutions for most of the pressing global issues. Broadly, 3 thematic sessions were held. They were chaired jointly by myself and also by the Governor of the Central Bank of India, which is the Reserve Bank of India. The first one of the 3 thematic sessions is strengthening the multilateral developmental banks to address shared global challenges of the 21st century so that they can address global debt vulnerabilities, mobilize timely resources, and adequate finance for that was the first one. And the second one is to deal with the sustainable development goals for which mobilizing finances for climate action was the main focus. And the third thematic session was to look at digital public infrastructure, also look at sustainable cities for tomorrow, and financial inclusion and productive gains, all of which were focused items of the three thematic sessions. Ministers and governors reiterated the need for a well-calibrated monetary, fiscal, financial and structural policies in order to promote macroeconomic and financial stability and also to maintain growth momentum. On the margins, we had a high-level symposium on digital public infrastructure on the 23rd itself. And that particular high-level symposium was to look at various issues governing the digital public infrastructure. The particular matter of interest which I'd like to put before you is the G20 Troika members. It so happens that the Troika members, Indonesia, Brazil and India, had shared their success stories in the DPI, digital public infrastructure. While the interest was there among all countries, the success stories were incidentally from the Troika. So that was a matter of interest for all members, and it was also very heartening to know all the three are emerging market economies. Today we had a walk the talk policy in action, where the delegates were taken to the Indian Institute of Sciences, and a total of 53 delegates came for the visit. 7 of them were finance ministers or heads of international organizations, 9 central bank governors, and 37 delegates participated in it. There was a very good display, and in fact, I must say, even during the course of the session, third session of the afternoon today, several of those members of the delegates who came over had words of praise to say. It was one of those very, very effective visit, meaningful, and they had a lot of takeaways for them to carry back to their home countries, because they felt at one go they could have a lot of strides that the Indian startups have made displayed for them to see, and also from the Indian Institute of Sciences, which has been patenting a lot of their products. Once in 5 days, I'm told, they have 2 registration for patents. Every 5 days they register 2 patents. That was one of the things which was mentioned during our visit. And I'll just give the range of items which were displayed there, explained for the delegates. India's electronic vehicle system, electronic vehicles and ecosystem, semiconductors, biotechnology and healthcare, aerospace, artificial intelligence, robotics and drones. The various developments which are happening in all these areas were displayed. In fact, the President of European Central Bank, Finance Minister of Netherlands, G20 Finance Deputy of the USA, Vice President of the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, all of them thanked the Presidency for having made this arrangement for visiting the Indian Institute of Sciences. Each one of them, during the course of the discussions, mentioned that it was time well spent, and they mentioned a special word of thanks. Progressing further, there was a seminar on policy perspectives debating the road to policy consensus on cryptocurrencies. This seminar was also of great interest for most members who participated. That was held on 23rd February. It was to deepen the discussion around crypto assets and to foster better understanding of the broader implications of crypto assets. Then, continuing the theme of crypto, there was a panel discussion on leveraging national payment systems to enhance cross-border payment arrangements. It also had inputs on what happens to the cryptocurrencies which banks have bought out, like the way India's Reserve Bank has also come up with pilot for both retail and for wholesale use of cryptocurrencies, that is. CBDs, central bank driven currencies. Then there was a third event in which crypto could play a role. That event was the SME financing and bridging the gap, which was also organized for the delegates. So all of them have been well attended, well received, and there's a lot of discussion about it. On the debt vulnerability, the IMF, World Bank and the Indian presidency co-chaired and hosted a meeting of the Global Sovereign Debt Roundtable on the sidelines of the meeting. The objective of this debt roundtable is to bring together a diverse group of stakeholders to share their views and to coordinate and collaborate on global debt policy issues. Participants also of the roundtable comprised of official bilateral creditors, the Paris Club Secretariat, debtor countries, and also the private creditor representatives. All of them had participated. This is possibly the second meeting, I think. Just 1 minute. I'll give you greater clarity. There was one meeting held in February on the 17th with the deputies talking on the debt vulnerabilities on the round table. And today was the one with ministers attending it. So on the round table, which is being organized by the IMF and the World Bank, there are 2 meetings which have already been held, inclusive of today's. Then, of course, other than the meeting itself, we've had a cultural event in which we are in Karnataka. I'm happy to say the rich cultural grandeur of the Vijayanagara kingdom was displayed. It's actually, we called it Uttada Mele Sambhashanagalu, which is over a meal, particularly a dinner, there was a lot of discussions. So that was very reflective of the Karnataka culture, the food, the culinary variety which were provided were all reflective of Karnataka, the state in which this is being held. And so the Uttada Mele Sambhashanagalu was a very interesting and well-received cultural event with the food reflecting the state. There was also a display which was there for the last 3 days on Chennapatna toys, saris, brown cotton, which is unique to Karnataka, Kasuti embroideries, Chittara, the arts, and so on. Other than that, the CBDC had a display stall where you could go and test for yourself as to how the CBDC works. So that was one very interesting thing which most ministers wanted to go and try. I went and tried it from my end. Although I know the Reserve Bank of India's headquarters in Mumbai, there is even a fruit vendor at the ground on the streets close to RBI who uses the digital currency. So that was also an experience offered by us here. There were several fintechs and the Aadhaar-based stalls also, which could really be showcased. Tomorrow, there is a little trip-long excursion which is being offered taking any member of the delegation wanting to go to Nandi Hills, which is close by, Shravana Belgola, which is one of the world's very unique sites where the tallest statue of Mahavira, the Jain founder of the Jainism, is also there, and Beluru Halabedu. So all this, if I can call it as a brief summary of what has happened. I'm not getting into at this stage, maybe I'll explain it a bit later, about my personal engagement, bilateral and other things that I had attended to. But overall, when today the chair's summary and outcome document was taken up, I did mention it when I was introducing the chair's summary. I would like to say that as my concluding opening statement before you have any questions to ask. I am very grateful that India's presidency has received strong support on all our key priorities, has received strong support on all our key priorities, and therefore I'm very thankful to all the ministers and the central bank governors who participated today. India particularly got support for our proposal to bring in an expert panel who will go into looking and providing a narrative. They'll develop a narrative for an updated vision of the MDBs, and that can make the MDBs capable of addressing transboundary challenges and also for better development financing mandates that can be fulfilled. So that expert group was a proposal which was given by India. It has received, it has received support from all member countries. And just for information's sake, the expert group has been mandated to submit their report in 3 months' time, so that in the July meet, we will be able to take up the discussions and any follow-up action that may be required. And on that particular expert group, I'm indeed grateful to the US Secretary, Janet Yellen, who had really come forward, putting her support up front. Then the key successes of the negotiation, the team had done a really rigorous work, and I was glad to hear a lot of finance ministers praise the work of the Indian negotiating team. Each one of them came to me to say, you have a fantastic team which has gone through the negotiation process, and the team leaders, Ajay Seth, Secretary, Economic Affairs, is here. He led the team, and really they had gone through a consultation process without any kind of meeting difficult moments. Even if they were able to bring everybody on board. So that was one of the things. And on one of the successes for the negotiation, particularly for the chair's summary and the outcome document, was to have arrived at a common position on the debt language. That is a key one which sort of stretched till this morning, but I was glad when a common position has been arrived on that language. And it is important for us to emphasize on that, because the vulnerable countries are looking up to the G20 to find some solution, some kind of arrive at a position whereby their debt stress can be relieved. And many of them have been waiting for a very long time. So if we could arrive after so much of negotiation at a common position for a language on dealing with debt, I think the G20 is now standing up to meet the challenges of debt stress which many countries are facing. And this is a development which I think really reflects at the responsiveness and also taking up the responsibility of giving solutions, which the G20 group has always shown, and they have not failed this time either. So they stood up to the challenge, arrived at a consensus language, and as a result, on a very, very stressful issue of debt stress and countries really being on the cliff, we had to come up with a solution, and I'm indeed grateful that the G20 membership rose to the occasion and arrived at a common language. So 4 specific countries would benefit by a quick response from the international institutions, and the G20 has actually today paved the way for it. There was also a consensus on stepping up the implementation of the common framework. So that was one thing. And finally, before I conclude, I just want to say, I mentioned it during the session, Saudi Arabia had really come up with a kind of, from its own, came up to help on the discussions when it was on macroeconomic consequences of food and energy insecurity, because there was one reservation they had, but they came up and cleared it, and I'm thankful for them, because food insecurity, fuel insecurity is something which is worrying globally all countries, and for them to have come up saying, all right, we'll come in with our own, we'll join the team in getting a consensus. UK and USA, I'm grateful again for being very supportive on the global coordination framework, particularly on the crypto. China and Saudi Arabia again for coming forward on climate finance mobilization. They have been very, very proactive and came forward. Japan and United Kingdom, on all priorities of the Indian presidency, they've been completely supportive. So I'm indeed very grateful to them. And the G20 Troika, similarly, have been completely supportive of India's position and priorities, all India's priorities. So these were reflected with full consensus in our statement. So finally, I'm indeed very thankful to all the members. In a way, before the next meeting, which is in April in Washington, this first step, although there was what you would call not a chair or not a communique, but only an outcome statement, I would still think we've made good progress in having all the ministers on board. This would be my opening statement. Would Governor Das want to say something before we open the floor for questions?
The Finance Minister actually has very comprehensively covered all the aspects. I just wish to add 2 or 3 quick points. One is that by way of information, that from the Reserve Bank of India, we organized 4 side events, and the 4 side events were on cyber security, on payment systems, that is cross-border interoperability, then on financial inclusion, and the 4th one was on MSME credit. That's the first point I wanted to say. The second point is that by coincidence or whatever, the India-Singapore, the linkage between UPI and Pay Now really came at, at the right, most appropriate time, and that attracted a lot of attention. In fact, during the deliberations, quite a few finance ministers and central bank governors did mention about it as a success story, and which can guide the future of interoperable payment systems between countries and for cross-border transfer of money. And the third aspect I wanted to point out was that the gallery of various stalls which we had put out, that included the showcasing of the UPI by the NPCI, the CBDC stall which we had put up, and it was being run by the commercial banks, both public and private sector banks, and that attracted a lot of attention, as the finance minister has pointed out. And we were actually, the third aspect was, there was a stall where we were actually enabling the foreign visitors access to make UPI payments, use the UPI and make local payments even if they did not have bank accounts. This was one of the announcements which we had made in the last monetary policy meeting, and that was that has been operationalized. It was on demonstration, and it was an actual functioning. And then also there was a stall on the trades platform and how it's making a progress. I'll stop here. Thank you.
So, Mr. Shishir Sinha, Hindu Business Line.
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, sirs. Ma'am, my question to you, when you said that we have arrived on a consensus on language on the debt thing, but this morning, U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Yellen ma'am said that there are differences. So with the kind of differences what she's talking, how we are going to see the debt resolution for the vulnerable countries?
This morning's statement is before the consensus which has been arrived. So there are no divergences now. On the debt issue, we have come to a same page.
Mr. Arup Roy Chaudhary.
Minister, Governor, good evening. Ma'am, in the press conferences preceding you over the past few days, finance ministers of Germany, France, US, Japan, and others, they said that that they will protest any step back if the communique does not adopt the same language on Russia which the Bali leaders' declaration did. And that language was adopted in the chair summary. If that has been agreed to, why is it that we have a chair summary and not a communique, ma'am? What are the reasons for that?
Only because the Bali paragraph 3 and 4, which is exactly what the Bali Leaders Summit had come up with, was introduced, but two countries had a reservation. So, with a footnote, certainly it had to be a chair summary and an outcome document. Russia and China.
Mr. Akram, Indian Express.
And that was mentioned also in the Council, in the G20 meeting that we had. My introduction about the chair's statement, I did mention the name of the countries there as well.
Mr. Akram from the Indian Express.